Good morning and welcome to Ask Wildman. My name is Miles Bassett. I'm the CEO and founder over here at Wildman Web Solutions. We are a digital marketing agency in Lawrence, Kansas, and we specialize in working with small businesses and helping them to leverage technology to grow and succeed. So we started doing this live stream every week as a resource to anyone and everyone who wants to learn a little bit about digital marketing or technology. This is an open Q&A, so if you want to jump in, be part of the conversation, or if you have some questions about technology, marketing, advertising, or anything else, throw your questions in the comments below. We are live streaming to our Facebook page and YouTube channel, so pick your social media platform and then jump in, be part of the conversation. We do this every week, Wednesdays at 11. To answer your questions. So it's me and my partner here, Mike. I'll have you join. Hopefully. There we go.
Good.
Mike.
Good morning. How are you today, Miles?
I am doing well. See if I can't click enough buttons to make this thing work. Technology, it's difficult.
Well, you're steering the ship just fine.
All right. So like I said, this is an open Q&A. So if anyone has any questions or comments or anything, you can jump in, be part of the conversation, and put your questions in the comments below. We'll try to get to those. Or if you're watching this later, then you can actually email us your questions at askwildman@wildmanweb.com, and we'll get to your questions next week. Okay. Speaking of technology, look at this. New trick I found on here. Let's see. Let me know if you can see it. And we're snowing. I made it snow on our live stream for the audio listeners.
Well,
a fun little bit of technology. It is the season, you know.
Sounds like you're having a very productive morning, Miles.
Yes, actually I am. Hey, you got to have some fun every once in a while, especially this time of year, and throw a little bit of holiday magic in there. Okay, so moving on past that, throw your questions in the comments. We'll get to you here in just a second. We've already got our first live question, so we'll address that from our favorite viewer, Mr. Jeff Fry. Hello, Jeff.
Morning, Jeff.
He says, are you familiar with Parler and thought about marketing uses for it? So I think we can take this in a slightly broader context. We have talked about it a little bit, but we can probably go a little bit deeper into emerging social media platforms. Parler is, of course, one of the new up-and-comers, but it's hardly the only one, and it won't be the last new social media platform to kind of hit the market. And of course, wherever there's people, there's attention, there's engagement, there's going to be some sort of marketing angle to take there. So I think it's up to people like us, up to agencies like us to stay on the cutting edge, stay on the bleeding edge, look at these new platforms and see if there's going to be an opportunity there. Mike, I know you talked about last time, some of the bigger companies are now starting to turn their attention towards Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, these traditional digital marketing platforms, and making them a little bit more expensive, a little bit more difficult for smaller businesses, and had hypothesized that maybe some of these new platforms might be where some smaller businesses end up going, where they can get a little bit more bang for their buck. So are you going to keep going down that, or change your opinion on that a little bit? What do you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, good question. Thanks for the question, Jeff. I'm aware of Parler. I'll be honest, I haven't been on the platform yet myself, so I'm not speaking from any sort of expertise on the matter. So take this with a grain of salt. But I think overall, I've heard is gaining a whole lot of traction. There's a comedian actually that I follow on Facebook who's now about to get deplatformed, And so he's been all at the end of every one of his videos now. He's telling everybody to go over to Parler because he thinks it's a matter of time before his Facebook page is going to be taken down. So it's certainly somewhere where people are going that they feel like that they're not going to be censored, like is what is happening on the bigger flat platforms, Facebook and Twitter especially. And so I think it'll continue to grow. Is going to be my underlying opinion on it. And of course, just from a macro perspective, like we've talked about numerous times on the show, I mean, really what this entire game is about in terms of marketing and advertising is capturing attention at the lowest price point that you can with the greatest amount of attention. I mean, that's what we're trying to figure out here, in order to get the biggest ROA, which is return on ad spend or return on investment, if you're just thinking about it strictly in terms of a sales perspective. So anytime we can go on a new and emerging platform where it's easier to gain followers, it's easier to see, my organic posts will be seen. It's basically a land grab. I mean, think about it as just a good old fashioned land grab. And if you're out there first and you can stake your claim, well, it's yours. There's nothing, there's no competition that's really going to come by, at least for a while, on these new emerging platforms. And so this is the same thing that has happened on every platform that has ever been created. I mean, going all the way back to MySpace, is that the early adapters of it that have been able to create a foundation on the platform, put out good content, and build a strong, loyal, big following, they win. And they usually stay, those dominant people, on that platform until that platform, goes away. And sometimes those people don't jump well to new platforms, and that's actually one of the mistakes they make, is they get too comfortable where they're fat and happy. So from a marketing standpoint, I think it's always a good idea to go and at least test the waters on these new platforms, because they all are a little bit different, but they're all also kind of the same. They're all built on a previous platform for the most part. And so you're learning new skills, you're learning new ways to communicate that could be for a greater use even further down the line on one of these existing platforms. But Jeff, it's interesting that we got this question right out of the gate, because you're taking us into the big news of the week, which I wanted to touch on anyway. So I guess we can just kind of roll this into this conversation, because Parler definitely plays a role in all this. And that is, of course, right after we got done with the show last Wednesday, I think a couple hours later, the news came out about the Federal Trade Commission and the government's ruling with a lawsuit against Facebook. And so this was huge news, obviously, for anybody in the digital marketing space, or if you're just a user of Facebook, and particularly Instagram or WhatsApp. We could get into the weeds on all this, but I think right now we don't know what we don't know at this point, in terms of what's going to happen with this. Nothing could happen, or it could be so big that they actually make Facebook divest from Instagram and WhatsApp, and they become their own separate companies. So that would be definitely a paradigm shattering event if that did happen, and certainly one that could have a fallout for these new emerging platforms as well. I think as I alluded to last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago on the show when we were just discussing this possibility. Oftentimes when antitrust lawsuits and big regulations come down on an industry, it's actually the big mega giants that survive and thrive, and it's the new existing platforms that get throttled, and it makes them harder to actually take market share. And so if that does happen to this industry, that would be something that would concern me about these emerging platforms. But like I said, it's too early to tell, but it was certainly big news that they were at least moving forward with this lawsuit. And I'm sure Facebook is going to lawyer up, and we'll see what happens in the courts. But I guess my overall point in regards to something like Parler is that could certainly help or hurt these kind of new existing platforms. And Parler isn't the only one. MeWe, Miles, help me out. I know there's a couple other ones out there that are gaining some traction, and and still TikTok, is still in my mind an emerging platform, but becoming more and more sophisticated all the time. And I heard something interesting too. I'll just throw this in here because I thought I was thinking about it. I was listening to the CMO of Snapchat the other day, and I hope I don't mess this stat up, but he was saying that on Snapchat's platform, their daily user base of users 35 and over are actually greater than Twitter's entire user base of any age group. And so that's something that, typically we think about these emerging platforms as only skewing towards the very young. It's the teenager apps and things like that. And I think that that's an antiquated viewpoint at this point. And I think that we can say that you can't judge a book by its cover, and that a lot of these platforms are actually skewing upwards, especially I think skewing upwards in terms of age range, especially something like Parler, because it seems to be a lot of people who are leaving Twitter and Facebook, and they're going to this platform. And Twitter and Facebook have traditionally been the oldest in terms of demographics of user base for a platform. So certainly I wouldn't think that Parler would be something just for the kids. And so, like I said, it's worth a shot. And it's certainly worth to get on there and see if you can, take advantage of this land grab and go out and stake a claim to an audience. Because usually what happens on these emerging platforms, the reason they're so great to jump on early is because there's more attention than there is content. Meaning there's more people wanting to watch something or wanting to click on something or wanting to engage with something than there are people who are making and putting the content out there for people to engage with. So if you're a content creator, if you are a small business, if you're somebody who is wanting to build an audience in order to leverage it, to sell a product or a service, certainly I highly encourage you to at least test these waters and see it out for yourself.
I think that was a pretty comprehensive answer there. I do want to jump in on a couple more specific points to try to answer your question, Jeff, about Parler, but it does kind of touch on something broader, because they're doing some things that a lot of new platforms are doing. And I think, maybe with some of these antitrust crackdowns, and I mean, if the government has their way, and some of these major social media players might have to change their game plan a little bit, so they could follow in this direction as well. And that's kind of what they're calling a decentralized model. This is really Parler's big thing. This is their main direction. And I think I've seen a couple of other social media platforms kind of leaning in this direction too. So might want to think about it a little bit. But basically the idea is that you're not paying, you're not putting your ads on the platform directly, like paying Facebook to then display your ads to their network. Instead, you are paying, you're advertising on a particular influencer, someone who has a big following on that platform, and then you are advertising to that influencer's audience. Mm-hmm. So they're even calling it their influencer network. That's, instead of their ad network or something, they are calling it their influencer network. The idea is that you can choose who you are displaying your content to, who you are advertising to. You get that sort of credibility that comes with the sort of influencer marketing that we see on like Instagram, and having those influencers market your brand. And then also on the customer and the consumer end, they can choose what kind of advertisements they're seeing by giving their attention to particular individuals, to particular influencers. And so people they like, people whose content they like, they're only seeing their advertisements chosen by that individual. So if you like this person and you like their content, you're more likely to like the kinds of advertisements that they're going to have presented to their own network. This way, you're kind of distancing yourself as a platform from the advertisers, from the influencers, from the customers. You're sort of stepping back. And again, they're having that kind of decentralized attack on this, which is, again, just removing themselves or at least taking one step back from the entire advertising process. So it's a little bit of a different model. It could be beneficial to some people. I don't know how it's going to shake out. No one really does, but I guess we'll see. And this one, Parler is kind of um, the lead in this, so we'll see how they do. One other point that might be interesting here, and that is that they are restricting things a little bit less. Their rules are pretty simple. Pretty much, they just don't allow anything blatantly illegal on their platform, which isn't too much different from advertising on, say, Facebook. But there's a couple of specific areas where that might be seriously advantageous. We've talked about on this show doing, like CBD marketing. If you have a CBD company, Facebook gets a little bit touchy on some of those rules, whereas something like Parler, they're going to be fine with you marketing CBD products. So if you happen to be in one of those industries where things are a little bit touchy, these platforms that you have been advertising on have been difficult for you for whatever reason. Maybe you can't advertise at all, or your advertisements keep getting flagged for whatever reason. One of these emerging platforms might be a good way to go. And then, yeah, like you said, these things are pretty new. They don't have the audience that larger platforms do. So that is a little bit of a disadvantage, but the pro that comes along with that is it's cheap. Super, super cheap to advertise on these platforms right now. So if you can get your strategy right, and if you can get in front of the right kind of people there, this could be an incredibly cost-effective way to reach your audience. And that is, jumping on one of these smaller platforms. It's just a smaller marketplace. And so you may be able to be a little bit more competitive over there.
Yeah, that's a great point, Miles, about the decentralization of the platform and the use of influencers. And just to tie this a little bit back into marketing, which thanks for doing that. The other thing too is you're probably going to have a lot cheaper costs on an emerging platform right now. You may even be able to, like we've talked about before, get an organic audience without even paying anything if your content is good enough to have to advertise. But I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and we alluded to it at the end of the show last week when I was talking about how I'm seeing a trend of the big Fortune 500 companies not only spending a whole lot more on Facebook, but getting more into things like Snapchat and Twitch and TikTok and these emerging platforms. And that's all going to drive up price and drive out small business owners. And we're already seeing it on the Facebook platform. This fourth quarter, has been a bloodbath in terms of issues that the platform has had, bugs and all kinds of things on the back end, and then just rising prices. And of course, we've been warning about this for years. Anybody who's been paying attention knew that this was coming. I don't know if we saw the bugs and those kind of technical issues on the back end as bad as they are, but the bottom line is we've got to be finding alternatives. We always have to be Lewis and Clark. We always have to be exploring and pushing to see where that new frontier is, and going out there and seeing if it's fertile land or not. So sorry to keep using the land grab analogy, but it really is how I think about this emerging technology and the way that we can interact with it from a business standpoint. And so your costs are probably going to be a lot cheaper. And if you're a business that doesn't need a huge audience, why are you paying to reach a huge audience? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I'd rather reach a small audience and be able to reach them effectively and more cost efficiently and convert them and have what I need than try to reach this huge piece of the pie. And so influencer marketing, I know next week we're going to do our predictions for 2021, but here's another teaser. I think influencer marketing is going to come back into popularity and be a really big thing that small businesses utilize in 2021 because of the cost effectiveness of it. We're, especially on a platform like Facebook, we're getting almost to the point where it's hard to pick 7 different pieces of creative and be able to afford to test all those on a small business budget like we've been able to in the past. So how can we use our budget more wisely? How can we go, directly into an audience that we know is our audience, we know is going to convert? Influencer marketing is going to be a big, big thing that I think a lot of small businesses are going to be able to utilize, not only on things like Parler, but also on Instagram and other platforms as well.
Guess we got a little bit of a follow-up question here. Let's see, any tips on catching attention in the first few seconds we get to grab attention?
Free beer.
That'll work. That'll work well for us anyway. It'll definitely get our attention. If we're talking about in social media, I guess we'll just keep down that line and then maybe go a little bit broader. I'll let you have that, Mike. But going through social media, probably the biggest, easiest win there is video. People they have that infinite scroll. You've got this, just go, scroll through Facebook, through Instagram or whatever. They tend to stop on movement. So video can be a good way to do that. Having a, catchy intro in there, of course, like we have our neon sign here at the very beginning. I mean, nothing's catchier than a neon sign. And having something text-based in there as well can be a good, I don't know what you would call this, conversion metric. Because a lot of people scrolling through are on mute. They don't have their audio on or anything. So if it's just you talking, or you don't have anything there up front, they're not going to see what it is. They're not going to know what's happening. So video with some text at the very beginning in the first couple of seconds can be a very high converting item as far as getting people to stop that scroll and look at you for a little bit longer. And then once you get past that, it's just up to your content. You better be doing something interesting to keep them around. But yeah, that's my quick and easy tip to win that attention in the first couple of seconds, at least on social media. Mike, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah. First of all, that's the right question to be asking. So great question. I think, Miles, you nailed it there. I'll just expand a little bit on the content part. So there's an old saying in advertising called surprise the broca. And the broca is the part of your frontal lobe of your brain that basically where shock happens. And so what you want to do is you want to disrupt the mundane images and messages that are coming into the brain, and you want to shake it up a little bit and you want to surprise it. And so that's going to get the brain to stop, tune in, and say, what is this? I need a little closer examination of what exactly this is. So the first key here is to understand exactly who your target audience is, because that's all we care about. And target is the key word there. We're not trying to talk to everybody. We're trying to talk to, again, our P1 listener, or, our fanatic fan, if you will. That's who we want to talk to. And we want to address exactly what their need is or their want in those first 3 seconds. And if we know who they are, if we know that they're insurance agents in Kansas City, then you say, hey, insurance agents in Kansas City. And then the next line is exactly what you're going to give them. There's other tricks like, hey, if I know that, it's a 20 to 30-year-old single male as my target audience, I want to put an attractive female in the first 3 seconds in the image. It's kind of a no-brainer. But, obviously you have to understand all the senses that are being affected here. So sight, sound is what we're trying to focus on. And we're trying to surprise the broca and then provide value as soon as we can that we have the attention grabbed.
So it's the shock and awe strategy.
It's exactly correct, Miles. It's the friendlier shock and awe strategy than what happened in the Iraqi war. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and one of the things that at least catches my attention a lot and really makes me stick around. There's been a couple of times I've just been, scrolling through Facebook or whatever, and I end up watching something, not even realizing that it's an ad for a second. just because they made something entertaining, they made something fun. They clearly had fun making this thing. It doesn't have to be cinematic quality or anything. Some of these things were clearly just shot with smartphones. But they put a little bit of effort into making it entertaining, making it funny. It was sort of mini comedy sketch, if you will. And that made me stick around past that, because as soon as you see something as an ad, most people's inclination is to go on, scroll away. They don't want to see it. As soon as they know something is that, as soon as they know they're being pitched, they want to leave. So if you can make it not only just valuable, but entertaining, to make it seem like you're not directly pitching them, you're not immediately asking them to buy something, you're not immediately just saying, here's value, now buy something. You're being entertaining, you're being funny. You want to, I don't know, convince them to watch this thing, get sold on you, get sold on whatever sort of entertainment that you're providing, and then they're at the end say, oh, hey, by the way, buy my stuff, go to my website, whatever the call to action is.
100%, Miles, and you just made a really important point there. And first of all, this be a good opportunity to once again define what we mean by value. Providing value, anything that's educational, entertaining, or informative that it aligns with the interest of your target audience. But I think the really important point you just made there is, especially when we're talking about social media, is that these people aren't there to be sold anything to. The last thing that people go on Facebook to do usually, is get sold to. This is why advertising on social media is a lot different than, say, my Google AdWords campaign, right? When I'm doing a Google AdWords campaign and my target audience is searching for my product or my service to buy on Google or Bing or wherever they're going, that's a completely different psychology, right? When they go into Facebook, when they go into Instagram, they're wanting to see what their friends are up to. They're wanting to catch up maybe on some news. They're wanting to see what their grandkids are doing, or their grandma, their family. That's what they're doing. And so we are interrupting. It's literally interrupting advertising. It's no different. Well, it's a little bit different, actually. I'll qualify that, than on television, right? When we sit down to watch TV, when we watch our TV show, the last thing we want is the commercial break, right? That's when we always get up when we go to the bathroom, or these days we'll open up our phone and we'll get on Twitter and we'll argue about what happened in the show with people that we've never met before. But that's what we do. The last thing we want to do is be like, oh, let's buy something. And so this is where content marketing and content advertising comes into play, which I know we talked about before on the show, but it always bears repeating because it's the antithesis of interruption advertising. And what content is doing is providing value, and the selling is an afterthought. So we're providing education, we're providing information, or we're entertaining, or hopefully we're doing all three. And that's what people engage with the most on social platforms. And so when we're talking about building a brand, when we're talking about getting somebody to know, like, and trust you, that's the kind of content that we should be putting out 3, 4, 5 to 1 to the, hey, here's my product, buy it. That should be the afterthought and not our first thought. And I think that's the biggest mistake that especially small businesses can't quite get their head around, is how do I engage my content in a social manner on these social media platforms. And I tell you, there are some who do it really well and they're quite successful, but it's the exception, not the rule.
I want to kind of back up there just a little bit to touch first on this follow-up question here, and then to define something a little bit more. So Jeff has asked, is funny the preferred method for keeping attention? That's just something that I said because I had seen an advertisement recently that it was funny, and that's what kept my attention. It's not necessarily the way. It's definitely not the only way. I want to go back to what you were saying there, Mike, and that is defining value. When we say providing value, because what I immediately think is something like this show. It's just straight up value. It's here's how to do this. We're here to literally answer your questions and provide value to you. But that's not necessarily what we're talking about when we're talking about advertisement. We're talking about marketing and creating something that is value. That could be something that is entertaining. That's valuable to them. It could be something that's funny. It could be something, some marketing campaigns kind of lean into the whole fear thing, or make you afraid of something. Security companies or something like that. They play on a different emotion there. But ultimately, you're just doing something that is impactful, something that is meaningful to the end user, to that person that's consuming this media. So it doesn't have to be funny. I'd say, depending on your brand, depending on what it is that you're marketing, what you're selling, and also based on you. Some people are good at being funny, some people aren't. Jeff, knowing you, that might be a good direction for you to go. It seems like a pretty good character fit, but it does depend on what you're good at. I'd say play to your strengths, and find a way to provide some sort of value to people, and that can come in infinite ways. But yeah, I just wanted to hit on that definition, Mike, that you hit there very briefly, and dive in a little bit deeper on just defining what we mean by value.
Yeah, thanks for taking the wheel there, Miles. I was joking on my own words. A good example of content marketing that doesn't have anything to do with being funny is Red Bull. Red Bull has an actual channel. I forget if it's on Netflix or one of the streaming services, but they have an actual reoccurring show that they put out extreme video content for extreme sports fanatics, because that is what they deem as their target audience. So again, it's all about reverse engineering who your target audience is and what they want. So maybe it is funny. And and if that's what your target audience really wants, and you're not funny, well, you better find somebody who's funny, and make them part of your advertising, to be able to relate to those people. But yeah, it's all about just reverse engineering what the customer wants, and that's another big thing that I think has changed over the last 10, 20 years. Especially, and I know we've talked about it a little bit before on the show. We can't harp on it enough. It's not a top-down messaging system anymore. It's not the brands just tell the consumers what they want, what they like, and then the consumers say, okay, we'll buy that, because there's no other choices. There's no other feedback. There's no other communication. It's all decent, to use that word, decentralized again. That's what I feel like almost all of marketing is now. And that, we not only hear from the brands, but we hear from the users of the brands. We hear from influencers of the brands. We can share our own opinions of brands in real time on too many platforms to count. And so as a brand ourselves, or as a company ourselves, it's more important than ever that we're listening and that we're reacting to what the customer wants, because if we don't, we're going to lose. The customer has all the power now, and the customer can easily tell who is empowering their power and who is not listening to them, not servicing them, and that's where they're going to decide to go and do their business with. And it's becoming more and more the case, even since post-COVID. Like we've talked about before on the show, the numbers clearly indicate that people are more loyal right now to the brands that they feel like are servicing them the best, and they won't leave them. They won't go test a competitor right now like maybe they would have in the past. I saw a really interesting stat the other day about the younger generation, that people over 75% of people who were 35 and under, the number one indicator of whether or not they were going to do business with somebody was their technology and their web presence. And if their technology and their web presence weren't up to snuff, they feel like that was an inferior brand, and that they weren't really going to be able to do the best that they could for them. And so they were going to pick the people that they thought, they had the app, or they had, the curbside pickup, or whatever it was. And so, this is so important right now that businesses can't go on the on the defense, so to speak, and they have to continually be reevaluating themselves and not trying to be everything to everybody. Again, it's finding who your target audience is and listening to them, and they'll pull the other people along. They'll end up being your champions that are out there giving you the 5-star reviews and getting the peripheral people in your camp. But you gotta stay laser focused on what those people want and talk to them about it all the time.
I feel like there's a couple of points that we keep coming back to, not only today but on this show in general, and that's one of them is reverse engineering things. Starting from the end point and building up from there. In this case, starting with your target audience, and trying to figure out what it is that they would want to see, and then try to figure out the best way that you can create that thing that they would want to see, and then after that, finally coming to the place where you can convert, you can get them to visit your website, visit your store, buy your whatever, using that content that you created specifically for them. So selling is the last thing that you're even thinking about, but really kind of using that reverse engineering tactic. It seems like we keep coming back to that one a lot. The other one that I kind of heard you say in there is just there's so many options, there's so many technologies, there's so many platforms, whether we're talking about social media or paid advertising or search advertising or SEO or websites or anything. There's so many options out there, and well, I wish that I could just come out and say, here's the tool set, here's exactly what you need, A, B, C, done. Unfortunately, I can't really do that. There's so many tools out there. You've got to pick one that works best for you, works best for your brand, works best for your strategy. And that begins with understanding yourself, understanding your brand, understanding your target audience. That way you can pull the right tools out of that toolbox and leverage technology optimally for you and your particular circumstance.
That's correct, Miles. But here's one thing. Here's one principle I think we can universally, apply across the board, and something that we've definitely, it keeps coming up in almost each episode as a theme, and that is speed and convenience. There are a lot of options out there. The people who are the businesses who always win are the one who gives the people speed and convenience over the others. And that stat with the young people and them preferring technology and better web-based businesses over the ones that lack it, that was really what stood out to me is, that's another indicator the consumer always wants speed and convenience. This is just the new way of speed and convenience. But it's no different than, last week when we were talking about Colonel Sanders and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and the reason he had to go from cooking that chicken to 30 to 40 minutes down to 8 minutes. Right? It was all about the customer wanted speed and convenience. I mean, that's why McDonald's exists, right? It's like they redid the entire burger or the entire food industry really based around putting an assembly line in a restaurant. Well, it was the exact same thing that Henry Ford did, and it was the exact same thing that Milton Hershey did before McDonald's did. And then Taco Bell took that same thing. Burger King took that same thing, and away it went, right? And today, in the 21st century, the same macro principle applies. It's just that speed and convenience is technology and web-based solutions. And the people that are able to offer the most convenience and satisfy their customers the best are going to win.
Yeah, and just to clarify, we are not recommending that everyone go out and make fast food versions of their company or their business. You can apply speed and convenience in a lot of ways. It's not necessarily about draining the quality of your product and making a cheap, crappy version of it or something. Speed and convenience can apply to engaging with your company, communicating with your company, the customer service element of something where, you add a live chat to your website or something, or, create a little bit more of a social media presence where people can engage with you where they already are on their social media platform of choice. So that speed and convenience factor can apply in a lot of ways outside of just making cheap crap as fast as you can.
100%, Miles. I mean, look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs are the best football team on the planet because of speed. That's it. They figured it out. They figured it out. 3 years ago, they were like, we're going to build a team. It's going to be the fastest team that's ever set foot on the field. And I think they've won 23 of their last 24 games. So, it's working out pretty well.
I thought that's because Mahomes was some kind of second coming or something.
Well,
that's what I keep hearing.
That doesn't hurt either. You got to have a little secret sauce in there as well.
Yeah, so there are very few things that we can just say blanket answers to everything, but that speed and convenience factor, I think you're right. We can pretty much apply that everywhere. You just got to be careful where you throw it, not sacrifice your brand, not sacrifice your quality or anything, but try to make it faster and easier to engage with you and your business. Whether that is putting together a better website or getting on social media or opening up new communication channels or amping up the technology at your company so that you can work a little bit faster, a little bit more efficiently. That speed and convenience factor can pretty much be applied anywhere. Let's see. Step back a little bit for anyone joining us. This is Ask Wildman, open Q&A provided by Wildman Web Solutions. We're a digital marketing company, so we're here to answer your questions about advertising, about marketing, about technology, about business. If you want to ask us anything else, you absolutely can. We'll do our best, but no guarantees outside of those general areas. Throw your questions in the comments below, and if you think that the information that we're providing is valuable, help us to reach a broader audience by liking, sharing, following, etc. All the social media words. If you like and share this video, if you engage with this, even just throwing in a quick hello comment helps the algorithms to let people know, or lets the social media overlords know that people like this and someone else may indeed want to see this. Another piece of another resource that we're putting out there. I said this last week, but want to rehash it a little bit. We did just redo our own website, wildmanweb.com, and really are emphasizing the resources on there, trying to make it a really good educational resource for small businesses. So we're expanding on our blog there. We put all of our live streams, this show, all of the shows that we've ever put out there are now on our website, full live stream archive. And we'll be working over the next couple of weeks and into 2021 at making that website more useful, more of a resource. So if you haven't checked it out recently, go to wildmanweb.com and see what you think. You can go to wildmanweb.com/blog to get to our articles there. And there's a bunch of other resources that'll be coming up here in the upcoming weeks. All right, I got one question about SEO. So I think we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're still talking about differing platforms, but now going to be talking about search. Had an interesting conversation with someone earlier this week about an SEO campaign and trying to find the best ways to measure, what's working and what's not. And I ended up talking about something that I realized I hadn't brought up on this show and really hadn't talked to a lot of people about. And that is doing SEO on smaller search engines. Yahoo, Bing. Yes, Bing is still a thing. And so since these search engines are smaller, they don't have as much market share or anywhere close to that of Google. People kind of overlook them and they don't really work on them at all. And it is true. It's definitely a smaller market share. You're going to reach less people. And so it might not be worth your time. If you have very limited resources, it's probably best to put all of your eggs into the Google basket. But there are a couple of benefits that you get for working on those smaller search engines. And that is because it's a smaller marketplace, you can see changes happening faster and more dramatically. So one of the difficult parts about doing SEO is that everything that you do only impacts it a tiny bit, and you're not really going to see the impact of what you're doing for days, hours, weeks later. So it could be that you do 5 hours of work today, and you're not really going to see that ranking jump for another 3 weeks. And so it's kind of hard to tie what you're doing to the actual effect of something. Putting yourself into a smaller area, smaller market, say, Yahoo search, allows you to see those changes a lot faster and a lot more dramatically. So something that would have only been a half a point ranking change on Google is 10 points or 10 rankings change on Yahoo, and it happens 10 times faster. And these other search engines they're basically just copying Google. If you look at their algorithms and how they're doing their searches, they're just trying to do what Google does. So they are the Google search algorithm, but a little behind the curve. So it can work as a really valuable test case for your other search efforts. And if you see yourself trending upwards on Bing, most likely what you're doing is working. And it's going to apply to Google as well, but those changes might not be quite as obvious or quite as drastic. So in this particular campaign, we're seeing, keywords jumping from ranked number 78 all the way up to 9 on Bing. And then on Google, that's a change of 5 rankings or something. But it lets you know that what you're doing is actually working, and can really help you to sort of fine tune your efforts. So I guess my point here would be, don't just throw the smaller markets out by the wayside because they're not worth it. Use them for as a test case. Use them to test some stuff, to measure some things, and to make sure that what you're doing and all of the time and energy and resources that you're putting into your search optimization is actually working and going in the right direction. So yeah, just had that conversation earlier. I thought that'd be a good point to throw out, especially for anyone jumping into the search engine optimization world. Use Bing.
Yeah, and Miles, and also don't overlook Bing for ads either. Same principle applies. Bing ads, if you can get clicks for 20, 30, 40 cents and get conversions, that is obvious, usually an overlooked avenue that a lot of businesses aren't taking advantage of. So there's not a lot of competition there, and it's cheap traffic. And if you don't need a lot of traffic, you just need good traffic. Well, that certainly is an area to take a peek at. And then Miles, I got a question on SEO yesterday, actually, in a client meeting, and I said, I tried to answer it my best, and I said, well, I'm going to have to get Miles though to give the official seal of approval answer on that. So he was basically, the business has great SEO currently, and they were just really wanting to know, what should be best practices if you have great SEO in order to keep it, in terms of maybe updating your website, what should or you shouldn't do that may affect your SEO ranking if you don't want to lose a good one.
Kind of cut out there at the very end for me. Can you back up?
Yeah, what should you be doing or not doing in terms of updating your website if you want to maintain a really good SEO ranking?
Sure. So a website can kind of be broken up into the main content and the metadata. Metadata is information about your website. Your page descriptions, your titles, alternate text on images, things like that. These little tags, tiny pieces of information on your website. These things can be updated, meticulously taken apart. Make sure that you put all the right keywords in there. You can do a lot of work on just the metadata. On the actual content of the website, and I'll have a caveat here in a second, the actual content you probably don't want to change as often. I talked about this a little bit last week. You can obviously go in there and change some basic text or update an image or something when you need to change your content. You had a sale on there that's no longer valid. Obviously, you need to take that off and everything. But don't just go onto your website and change your content constantly, drag and drop this around, create new pages, delete old pages. Because the algorithms aren't going to like that. People aren't going to like that. You're going to end up with broken links and mistakes, and it's just not going to be worth your time and energy. So if you're talking about just updating the content, I'd say focus on the descriptions, focus on the metadata, and really take that apart with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that you have the proper keywords in those in your metadata, and don't focus as much on your site content. The caveat there being something that's meant to be updated, like a blog. I've talked about blog in terms of SEO before, but the basic concept is search engines like seeing that sort of regular live updating content on there. It lets them know that the business is still alive, it's still current, you actually care about putting good content out there. It's your opportunity to put out other keywords as well. If you want to write, you want to show up for a particular keyword set, write a blog article on whatever that keyword set is focusing on. It's a good opportunity to put out good content there and to put out something that is keyword packed without editing the main content of your site. That being said, old blog posts should be archived, and you have to do that regularly. So if you're only going to write one blog post every 6 months or something, maybe that's not the route for you. But if you think that you can stay on top of it and do a blog post, once a week, once a month, something regular, then that can be a huge help on SEO. Now, as far as updating your website entirely, you want to redevelop your website. You want to, you had an old HTML site and you want to upgrade to doing a WordPress site or a Joomla site or something like that. So you're switching technologies, you're switching platforms, you're switching designs, total revamp. You have to be very careful at that point to not lose your search rankings. It's possible that Google and other search engines will see your new website as a completely new website, as not you, as something completely different, and therefore you aren't deserving of all of that search momentum and all those
equity,
credibility that you had before. Yeah. So your domain authority is going to fall because they don't know that you're the same person. There's also, again, problems with broken pages or broken links out there. You have tons of links to your website all over the internet that maybe you don't even know about. You probably only know about the tip of the iceberg there. There's links all over in different directories and map services and review sites and you name it. There's links to your website, and it might not just be your home page. It could be one of your sub pages or something. And as soon as you change that, web, or you update your website, if that link isn't there and you don't have the proper redirects in place, then search engines are going to see the 404 error. They're going to see that broken link, and they're going to assume that your website's gone, it's changed, you're out of business. Maybe this is a new business on the same domain. And so, you got to be really careful about doing that update. So if you are doing a full update, really put some special attention into maintaining what you have. Talk to an SEO expert, talk to an agency like us, and see what they can do for you. At least make sure that you have all the proper redirects in there. So if you do have an old page that's not going to exist anymore, then you're redirecting that. If you had I don't know, before you had a www before your domain, and now you're just using just your domain without the W's at the front. If before you had file extensions on there, like you had an old HTML site and you had home.html in the actual link, then that's not going to work anymore when you update to, say, a WordPress site that doesn't have that. So really pay attention to those redirects and your content, and then submit your site for re-indexing afterwards to make sure that you are staying up to date on everything. Make sure your listings are proper and correct, up to date. Just really put a little bit of extra effort, a little bit of extra attention when you republish that new website.
Well, I definitely did not give that thorough of an answer yesterday, Miles. So thank you for explaining that to me.
Hopefully that was mostly useful and less rambly than it seemed.
No, that was very, very good. I'll try to relay that to the client.
All right, we got another question coming in the comments here, asking about hashtag small business challenge. I've not done it yet, but I've watched the number of people that have jumped from 5,000 to 35,000 in 1 week. Is this one of those things I should participate in to help the algorithms? I'll throw that up here. It's a little bit of a long comment, so I won't show the whole thing, but we can at least feature your picture and your cute dogs.
Yeah, thanks
Uh,
for the question, Chelsea.
yeah, so oh, these hashtag trends. I don't know, I kind of have I have lots of opinions about these things, but depending on the hashtag trend and if it really applies to you and you have some good content to put out there, it can help you to reach new audiences. Um, Especially how social media platforms are going nowadays. People only see the pages that they're following, and they don't even see all of the posts from the pages that they're following. People are really only seeing a very small amount of the content that's being put out there, and so it can be a little bit difficult to reach people outside of your bubble. By jumping onto one of these hashtags, it can be a way for you to join a broader conversation and get some new, fresh eyes on your page, on your content. With that being said, there is a lot of people participating in this, so you have to be able to stand out on it. You can't just say, hi, this is my business, hashtag this, and then expect a bunch of people to, see you and engage with you that way. If the hashtag is applicable to you and your business, and you think that you can really put out something that's going to stand out in the enormous crowd, then it can be a really good way to, again, reach a new group of people, and get some fresh eyes on your page. Get that injection of engagement based on a single post. Otherwise, I don't know, a lot of people jumping on that bandwagon. It's a huge group of people, and it can be very difficult for you to stand out. It may not really be worth your time there. Mike, do you have any points on sort of these hashtag trends, or even this one specifically, the small business challenge?
Yeah, I'm checking it out right now, Miles, because I was not familiar with it. But I tell you what, there's a whole lot of engagement happening in this thread. I mean, I've looked at a few dozen posts here, and I think the smallest one was 20 comments, and the biggest one I've seen is 500 some comments. And I'm going through and I'm trying to figure out how much of this is actually good stuff. It looks like it's, in some of these big comments, some of it's a little spammy. Some of it, though, are actually a bunch of people interested in their products. So, I mean, for something like this that seems to be catching a bit of a trend, it certainly wouldn't hurt, So I'd certainly probably utilize something like this. In knowing what I know about Chelsea's business, this would fit in really well. It looks like with some of the other participants that are doing this. So yeah, I say go for it. Are all of these kind of hashtag trends worth your time? No. A lot of them kind of peter out or don't go anywhere, or it's just kind of people just spamming each other. But this one looks like it actually is gaining some traction, and this is a good time. There could buyers out there, consumers out there at this time of year who really they do look for the small businesses to support. They don't want to buy their Christmas presents at Walmart and Target and the big retailers. They want to support individual small businesses and entrepreneurs. And so, like I said, there's no cost involved here other than your time. So, yeah, I'd put a little bit of time in here and try to work it. It looks like too it's good, especially used in some groups. Like I'm seeing people share it to different Etsy groups or people where they think that their niche audiences would be, and they're getting really good reactions from it. So it seems like a good trend, at least this time around. But yeah, as a rule of thumb, I just think you got to take them case by case. They're generally not as effective on Facebook as they are on Instagram, just hashtags in general. But this one looks like it has some legs to it. So good find.
Yeah, and I was In my answer here, I was also just speaking a little bit more generally on hashtag trends because I wasn't familiar with this particular one. Yeah, if something seems to be again relevant to you and you think you can really contribute something, a worthwhile piece of content, and use that hashtag in order to reach some new people, go for it. I mean, it's not gonna hurt really. Again, it's the only cost is your time here. It's just most of the time, probably not worth it for you. But yeah, if this one looks relevant to you and you think you can put something out there, then definitely I'd say go for it. We've got one more question here, and then I think we'll be rounding down for the day. I think this is about our previous conversation, the SEO conversation on the blog. So blog versus podcast. Very different. In general, I'd say put out content in whatever way you can or are most comfortable doing. If that's a podcast, if that's in video form, if that's written form in the form of a blog, or maybe you do Medium posts or something like that, whatever way that you think you can put out valuable content and you can create that regularly, I'd say that just go for it. It's going to be worth it to you. In the end, regardless of the direction you go, regardless of the medium you choose. In terms of SEO, those two things are very different between blogs and podcasts. Keep in mind, search engines can't hear your podcast. So if you put in the proper metadata, you put in the show notes, you put in a full transcript, you put in all the proper keywords, a podcast can be of benefit in search, but it's a little bit trickier. It's a little bit more challenging than a blog where it's just written text, and search engines can read that. They can see everything in your blog post as long as you structure it properly and put the keywords in your titles and you have the right markup with the title being an H1 or whatever it is. Then blogs are going to be probably a quicker, easier win when it comes to search than podcasts. Also, podcasts are typically hosted by another platform. You have your podcast on Spotify or on Spreaker or Podbean or whatever. You're not putting it natively on your website, or if you are, it's embedded from that other platform. So search engines aren't even really going to see it. You do have to put a little bit more work into your website to have your podcast natively on the site in a way that search engines and other crawlers are really even going to see it. So if there is going to be a search benefit, it's probably going to be towards your hosted podcast. So if someone searches for the Jeff Fry podcast, it's going to take them to iTunes or to Spotify or wherever your podcast actually is, not to your own website. Whereas if you have a blog and someone searches for, whatever it is that you're writing about, then they're going to see the actual blog post on your website. They're going to click on that and go to your website. So that's probably the main differentiation there. Not that you can't use podcasts for SEO or that they wouldn't be beneficial, but there's a little bit more work involved. And it can be a little bit more tricky just to get it to a place where search engines can really see that information. But again, across the board, pick whatever medium is best for you that you think you can put out good, valuable content on, and do that. Because if you're just doing a blog because you think it's better for search, but you're just a terrible writer and you should be doing a podcast, then that's not going to be as a crappy blog isn't going to be as valuable to you as a high quality podcast.
100%, Miles. It doesn't have to be an or. I really like, for a business to be able to do both, and you think, well, God, that's a lot of work. And really it's not. I mean, if you can start with just a podcast, a long form podcast, and then pay an employee or do it yourself to transcribe that down into a 500-word blog post, there you're killing two birds with one stone, and you're putting out twice as much content. And you're probably going to be reaching different people because, of course, people consume content in different ways. There are people who are readers, or people who are listeners. And so if you can, do both. But Miles's answer was, 100% correct. You have to first find out what you're best at. because that's what you're going to put the most out of. So if you're a really great writer, do blogs. If you love to talk, do a podcast. Because that's what you're going to be more successful at. Is the more you do, the better you're going to get, and the larger your audience is going to grow. But just if all things are even in terms of the person and the business, SEO aside, because Miles made some great points there about SEO, but just from a macro marketing, advertising kind of branding standpoint, I'm a really big fan of podcasts right now. I don't think anybody who watches this show, that's going to surprise them, because I talk endlessly about voice, and the power of voice, and how I think it's going to be the next big thing. I mean, it already is the next big thing. And so, and this, of course, ties back into that constant theme that we've been discussing over and over, and that's speed and convenience. And that's why I think voice ends up winning the day, not only today, but moving forward, is because I can listen to a podcast and I can cook dinner and I can clean the house and I can multitask, right? And what are we doing as human beings in 2020, 21? We're multitasking almost all the time. And for me to have to read something, I have to sit down and I have to, I can do maybe, some light multitasking, but I really have to pay attention to what I'm reading in order to absorb it. And at least for me, and maybe other people aren't like this, I can absorb a lot more through audio without being as glued to it. And so that to me is why I really think podcasting is not only the future of way we're going to communicate, but just voice in general is really important. And so the earlier that your business starts adopting voice related mechanics, I think the better, because it's how the majority of people are going to want you to communicate with them in the future.
All right. I think we're going to wrap up with that. We've been talking for about an hour now, over an hour now, so I'm sure they're tired of hearing us. If you are catching this later and you want to ask us a question, you can email us your questions at askwildman@wildmanweb.com, and we will hit your question next week. As this is a weekly show, we're doing this every Wednesday at 11. We're live streaming to both our Facebook page and to our YouTube channel. So if you prefer YouTube, jump over there. If you're a Facebook person, jump over there. And like I said earlier, if you think this content is valuable, if you think that we're answering some good questions, putting out some good information, then help us to reach some more people by liking, commenting, sharing. The more engagement we get on this video, the more people we get to reach and the more questions we get to answer. So that is it from us today. Mike, any closing thoughts?
Well, I hope everybody has a safe and prosperous week, of course, and I appreciate everybody, all the questions today, and everybody tuning in. Next week, we're going to have a little bit of fun. I think we're going to make our predictions for 2021. So it'd be a lot more fun if you guys all brought your predictions and filled the comment section with those as well, so we can entertain those in the discussion. Other than that, I look forward to next week, and y'all have a great week.
All right. See you later, Mike. Okay, that is it for today. We'll see you all next week, Wednesday at 11. Thanks for tuning in.